So for Halloween, we at Media Pod Smash Pop Culture Roulette decided we were going to do a movie review show, and I was given the task of reviewing some movies. So I decided that since I've been alive enough to do 5 decades, even though I'm not 50, I was born in 78, so I chose 78, 88, 98, 2008, and 2018. And we're going to, each episode will review a different movie. And this episode will be the first one, so we will start with Halloween. Halloween was opened on October 25th, 1978, and was directed by none other than John Carpenter. Now, before he had directed Halloween, he had Assault on Precinct 13, The Fog. Oh no, afterwards he did The Fog and Escape from New York and, countless numbers of other things. He also, oh man, the list of movies that he's done: Big Trouble in Little China, They Live, Ghost to Mars. Now, he wrote this one, he produced this one, and he also did the music for this one. So he is a multi-hyphenate person, because not a lot of directors do their own music. A lot of them will write, a lot of them will produce, but not a lot of them also do their own music. But he did co-write it with his constant partner through most of everything he's done, Deborah Hill. She helped co-write it. Now, this movie starred in her first ever movie role, Jamie Lee Curtis, who obviously, do we really have to go into who she is? This is the movie that kind of launched her career, but it also turned her into the one of the early scream queens. We also had PJ Soles, who was in Carrie and Boy in the Plastic Bubble before. Afterwards, the classic Rock and Roll High School with the Ramones. She was the star of that movie. She did Stripes and Private Benjamin. She's kind of just, been one of those people that kind of hangs out and does a lot of things here or there. A lot of B movies. And then we had Donald Pleasance, who was about the only person going into this movie that was really actually famous. He had a massive career beforehand. He did, I think, about 5 of the Halloween movies. But if you want to see an absolutely brilliant performance by Donald Pleasance, look up a MST3K episode on the movie Puma Man. And, it is just a brilliant episode of MST3K. Also in kind of a, not really a starring role, kind of more of just a cameo, there's the little girl towards the end of the movie. Lindsay is Kyle Richards, who went on to become famous for being on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. It's very strange first off, I've never watched any of the Real Housewives shows. I'm just aware of them because people talk about it. But it's very weird that, like, as a 6 to 8 year old girl, she was in one of the most iconic Halloween, horror movies of all time, and now she's doing that. Anyway, so the opening in this movie is about as iconic as you can get. You open up on a jack-o'-lantern. You're slowly fading in. It's just like, it's not an animated jack-o'-lantern. It's not a CGI. It is literally just the simple, classic cut jack-o'-lantern with a candle flickering in it. You've got the names popping up next to it. You've got a slow fade in, and then it's got the that music, that iconic, that Halloween music that I'm not gonna offend by trying to do an impression of. I'm sure we'll add in a clip of it so that you can hear it, but everybody knows it. So we're now on into Haddonfield, Illinois, 1963, on Halloween night. We have somebody who is peeping in on 2 teens who are making out. They're kind of, moving around the house. Like it's very POV style. It's not quite like found footage, but like it's very like, you are whoever's peeping in the house, you're in his eyes. So he's looking in this window, then that window, and then he goes around to the back of the house and the door is just open, which is our first lesson. Lock your doors, people. Because who knows where this movie goes if they had just locked the door. That POV style though does really add to the kind of creepiness and the incredible low budget nature of this movie. The budget of this movie was only $325,000, and $25,000 of that was just to Donald Pleasance. So you had $300,000 to make this entire movie. So now the person that was peeping is now broken into the house, picks up a mask. We now see a topless girl, and the person immediately stabs her, kills her. She's now dead. The killer now leaves the house, comes across two people who are getting out of their car, where we learn that the person who just killed this person, the topless girl, was actually the 6-year-old of Michael Myers. We're now introduced to, I think probably, and I honestly haven't seen a lot of the other movies, if I've seen any of them, so I don't know how much we ever see Michael Myers' face outside of the mask, but I know in this movie you don't see it again. He's just a normal looking 6-year-old little kid holding a bloody knife. Now, what I did notice that there's not a lot of blood and gore in this movie. For as much as you think like this movie is just like this, blood fest, like, and I mean, it is a slasher. It's one of the first slashers. It's not the first slasher. It's relatively bloodless. We'll come back across about this. So now we skip forward to October 30th, so the day before Halloween of 1978, and we're now at a mental hospital where Loomis is now giving us a lot of exposition to a random nurse who we see just in this scene, and then we never see her again. But I think this scene exists solely just to kind of give us an idea of who we're dealing with. He's telling her, he now tells us that the topless girl was Michael Myers' sister, which we hadn't learned until now. The Loomis believes that Myers is just pure evil and should be kept locked up forever and ever. Which of course means immediately he breaks out of the mental hospital. There's the nurse almost gets killed. Michael Myers manages to steal the car. There's a discussion later on about like how nobody believes that Michael Myers is actually heading towards town because he's been locked up since he was 6. He doesn't even know how to drive a car. And Loomis is like, well, I saw him drive a car, so somebody must have taught him. Or he, they don't really explain how all of a sudden this kid who has been locked away for 15 years knows how to drive a car. There's a lot of that, and we'll point some things out. So now we're back to Haddonfield on Halloween. We meet Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode, where we're setting up with a babysitting job, and we walk by the Michael Myers house because her dad's gonna sell the house. And we basically set up that like everybody in town knows the story of Michael Myers, and that house is the boogeyman house. That's the every neighborhood has the dilapidated house that like is either abandoned or should be abandoned. And so all the elementary school kids, probably even the high school kids, or probably constantly dare each other to go in the house, or because ooh, scary, people died, kind of thing. Michael Myers has now made it to Haddonfield pretty quickly. He sees Laurie Strode and is fixated on her immediately. So now You know, obviously nobody believes the hero. That you know, we have the beginning of that trope. You know, which, well, I don't know if it's the beginning. There's probably a number of examples. But Laurie Strode is now noticing this weird random guy in a mask kind of following her around town and watching her. Now, you would think that as a rational person, you would say, hey, I should like maybe tell somebody, like a teacher, official, or your best friend's dad who happens to be the sheriff of town. But yeah, doesn't really say anything. Just kind of goes, oh, that's weird, and keeps moving on about her day. In fact, there's this random large man in a white mask just going around town in a car, an official station wagon. Just nobody seems to notice or care about. It's very strange. Also very convenient for the actions of the movie. Because I would say, like, you know, I mean, granted, now I guess part of it is it's Halloween, so you know there might be a random guy just driving around town wearing a mask, but still, like, it seems a little strange. We're now introduced to our three main girls. We obviously already know Laurie Strode. We're messed with Annie, who's played by an actress named Nancy Keys, who doesn't really do anything after this, like a couple movies here or there. And then Linda, who is PJ Souls. Oh, that's skipping a page. We're skipping a whole bunch of the movie right there. We're immediately introduced to one of the rules of the horror movies, where Annie and Laurie Strode break them and start smoking pot.
Still spooked?
I wasn't spooked.
Lies.
I wasn't. I saw somebody standing in Mr. Riddle's backyard.
Probably Mr. Riddle.
He was watching me.
Mr. Riddle was watching you? Lori, Mr. Riddle is 87.
Oh. So we, you know, all of a sudden, you know, we got some, you know, some rule breakers going on here. Now we flip back over to Loomis, who gives us a little bit more information. Every time they need to give more information, they flip back over to this guy, who is just full of information, but not full of a lot of helping. We find that the Michael Myers has stolen his sister's gravestone, just ripped it right out of the ground and carried it off with him. This I thought was very interesting. Upon a couple of repeated viewings of this movie, the first time through I didn't catch it, but the next time through. So Annie and Laurie are driving around town, and they come across the hardware store that's been broken into, where Annie's dad, the sheriff, is like, oh, some punk kids broke into the hardware store and stole a Halloween mask and some knives, and the alarm's going off, so there's and then they turn the alarm off. Now, Michael Myers has been driving around in the mask all day. They just got around to turning the alarm off now. Like, who knows how many hours it's been going on. Like, and they just got, you know, like, it's like, so the time frame in the movie, like when stuff is actually happening, is kind of in flux, because, like, you know, they're like, oh, we're heading over to the babysitting job, and it's kind of dusk or bright, and now it's pitch black. Like, they don't really, I don't know how much of a timeline they're actually following. But, you know, this is where, you know, you probably shouldn't overanalyze movies. You just should enjoy them. I did notice, though, that Michael Myers is really, like, straight up tailgating Laurie Strode, like following her, like, almost like bumper to bumper, and they don't seem to notice him behind. They're just like, oh, whatever. Once again, Loomis goes to the Myers house, and once again feels the need to tell somebody about how evil Michael Myers is. Now, this is one of those strange scenarios where, like, normally the cop would be like, "You're crazy, man. Nothing like that ever happens." But the cop seems to believe him, and it's like, "Oh, you're right. We should do something." So that trope. They kind of play with that trope a little bit more than they do in future slasher movies. You have Laurie babysitting Tommy, and then across the street you have Annie babysitting Lindsay, who also is known as Kyle Richards, who goes on to annoy the world with the Real Housewives. But now Tommy looks out the window and sees Michael Myers, where all day Laurie has been looking out the window and seeing Michael Myers and freaking out. Now all of a sudden Tommy looks out the window and goes, "Hey, there's the boogeyman." And she's like, "Yeah, I don't believe you." Like, all of a sudden, like, so she's seen it all day, and the little kid's like, "I'm backing up your story," and she's like, "No, you're crazy." So now we flip back over to the house with Annie, who's talking on the phone and spills butter on herself, who then proceeds to decide that she now has to strip down to her panties. I mean, I don't know about you, but like if I've ever spilled butter on myself, my first instinct isn't just to rip all my clothes off in the kitchen, especially when I'm at like a house of a kid that I'm babysitting for. But, you know, maybe go to the bathroom, maybe, you know, maybe not just go, whoop, whip my top off and my pants. The house is also a little bit weirdly set up that the laundry room is like a separate house, like a separate building. Like it's like they built a shed behind the house and put the laundry room in it. So she puts on like this robe, dress shirt kind of shirt, and then just that's what she wears. This is where I think Michael Myers does, however, break my biggest unforgivable sin. And he kills Annie's dog, or not, I guess it's not Annie's dog, I guess it's Lindsay's dog. You kill all the teens you want, whatever. You know, teens are annoying, I get it. Sometimes they gotta go. And if they break the rules, as we'll learn, you know, but you kill the dog. I can't support you, man. You're just, I'm sorry, we're done here, you know. I do think it's very interesting. They keep showing Lindsay and Tommy in the separate houses watching The Thing, which John Carpenter would go on to direct what most people consider to be like the far superior remake. Because you've got The Thing that they made back in the 50s, which I'm sure why they're showing that one on the screen, because it was either super cheap or free. Where, you know, a couple years later, John Carpenter would be like, I'm going to remake it. And most people consider that to be, like, the better version of the movie anyway. I just think it's very interesting. I wonder if, like, while they were making the movie, he just kept watching it and goes, oh, I could do that. You know, or, you know, how coincidental it is. So Annie now decides to take Lindsay across the street. Pretty much still just in her underwear, because, you know, that's how you operate. Annie is then strangled to death in her car. There's so much honking going on, but yet nobody seems to hear it. Now, she was about to head over to her boyfriend's house to get him to either bring him back to the house or just to go have some premarital sex, which she had talked about having a lot already anyway. So we now know that she broke the premarital sex rule and the drug rule, so Mike Myers had to kill her. She had to go. Now, Tommy sees Mike Myers carrying a dead Annie. Now, I don't think he knows that he's dead, but he sees it. And once again, Laurie now doesn't believe him. It's so bizarre. There is a scene that I would like to be added here at about 57 minutes in, where Loomis just scares 3 kids for no reason. It's a very bizarre scene that they added into the movie, where Loomis is like hiding behind these bushes. I'm hoping we included it here, so watch it, enjoy it. It's bizarre. Now all of a sudden the sheriff, though, is not believing Loomis, and then immediately goes back to believing him. So it's like, whoa, we're almost at the trope of where the cops are like, yeah, never mind, you're right. This guy is crazy. Let's do something. So now Linda and her boyfriend Bob now go to Annie, the house where Annie was babysitting, for sex. They don't explain it. They don't go, why can't we go to Linda's house? Why can't we go to Bob's house? Bob happens to have a full-size van that he pulls up to the house in. The van is a rockin', don't come a knockin'. Now, we are going to a stranger's house where my best friend is babysitting at, so I can fuck my boyfriend. Yeah, whatever. Anyway. So we now see them having sex in a stranger's bed, and then they finish and have a cigarette. Bob then says the ultimate movie sin of "I'll be right back."
I'll be right back. Don't get dressed.
Mike Myers then stabs Bob and hangs him on a wall. Now what I noticed in this scene is that when you talk about iconic serial killer movie guys, iconic movie villains, you get the idea that Mike Myers is like this hulking behemoth of a man. And in this scene, and I don't know if in other movies he gets bigger, but in this scene, like, he's almost smaller than Bob. Like, to the point where you're like, how did Bob not fight him off at all? But Mike Myers is not this big hulking behemoth of a man that you would think he is or does become later on. So Mike Myers, being funny, takes Bob's glasses and throws on a bed sheet, walks up, walks into the room where Linda's like, "Ooh, look at my titties," and you know, only furthermore signing her death warrant. I mean, Mike Myers already watched them have sex and smoke cigarettes and want beer. Now she's flashing him. She doesn't know it's Mike Myers, obviously. She's all like, "Oh, you stupid Bob," and so she goes to call Lori, and Mike Myers uses the phone cord to kill Linda, where we could now have a game of is it sex or is it death? Because, like, you know, Linda's being killed on the phone, and Lori's like, "Oh, you're being gross," you know. Loomis finds the stolen car, which somehow has been like right behind him the whole time, and he didn't notice it. At least that's what they make it look like. I don't, you know, he could have been walking around the neighborhood for a while, but it kind of makes it look like he's been hiding in the bushes by the Myers house, and he turns around and he's like, "Oh, there's my car, it's been stolen." For hours. Now all of a sudden, because of the phone call, Lori decides to go to the house, where she now finds Annie dead and laid out on a bed with Mike Myers' sister's gravestone, and then Bob dead, and then Linda dead. So now she all of a sudden believes everything. Mike Myers, who has been successfully killing everybody, goes to stab Lori and misses her, who then falls down a flight of stairs, gets up and runs away. Now, this is weird, and I'm sure it's more of a commentary on society that John Carpenter put in there. She's running out of this house screaming bloody murder, screaming for help, and the neighbors close the windows and turn the lights off. So then she's left to fight Mike Myers on her own. So she gets over to the house where she has been babysitting. Mike Myers, again, has been locked up for 15 years, somehow knows how to cut phone cables. Apparently there was some sort of continuing education class going on at the mental institution. It was like, we're going to teach you how to effectively use knives. We're going to teach you how to cut phone cables. Walk really slowly, but get places fast. You know, we're going to teach you what hardware stores are and why you want to steal masks, how to drive cars. Basically, effectively turn you into the monster that you're at. And this could just be like, if I watched other movies, they would tell me this, but I haven't. So this is where I stand. So he gets into the house. She manages to stab him in the neck with something. So she thinks he's dead. because we've now learned, this is before we know we have to check the body repeatedly. She stabs him in the neck. She runs up the stairs, because that's what you want to do, is run upstairs, only to find out that he's not dead. So she's hiding in the closet with one of those, those closets with like the louvered doors that you can just immediately kind of push through. She pokes him in the eye with a hanger, which apparently somehow and then he drops his knife. So she grabs his knife and stabs him, once again thinking that she killed him, because, it didn't happen the first time. Not checking again the second time. Gets the kids out of the house. Now, Loomis is just out walking around the neighborhood now, because who knows why. Happens to be walking by the house where these two kids come screaming out of the house. They're screaming. So he runs into the house just as Mike Myers is about to shoot, is about to kill Laurie, and then just shoots him a whole bunch of times. He falls out the window dead. We look out and we see Mike Myers laying on the ground dead. Loomis turns back around, says something, and then turns back around and he's gone. They decide that they want to show us a quick recap of all the houses that we've been at. Like, we're really in just real estate here. We're reminded, hey, these houses are for sale. And now that there's some deaths over here, these houses are probably going to be for sale. Some weird breathing noises. Credits. Despite some of the review there, I did enjoy this movie. It was very well done. Just a couple quick trivia before I get into my final thoughts was Loomis was almost played by Christopher Lee. That would have been, I think, very interesting. I think Christopher Lee, I don't know how much different it would have been, but it might have added a little more gravitas. I don't know. Like, Christopher Lee just has a bigger presence about him. He turned it down because of the salary, but I guess throughout the rest of his career, Christopher Lee did say that this was one of the biggest regrets he had in his career of turning down Halloween. It made $47 million in the box office, which in 1978 is a lot, especially considering that, like, even in 1978, a $325,000 budget was considered nothing, was considered low. It is considered to be one of the highest grossing independent films of all time, like when you factor in inflation and all that. Obviously, everybody knows The Mask was a distorted version of Captain Kirk, which I guess for a long time actually severely bothered William Shatner. He's come around on it. This was one of the first movies to use Steadicam. And that with using the Steadicam and the POV, I feel like it really added to the creepiness factor. I think it also allowed them to keep the budget low because you didn't have to establish as many shots and you could do a lot more of the, just having the cameraman being able to walk and not having to like retrack everything. The body count for a slasher movie was only 5. And one dog they showed you implied there was a second dog. IMDb had it at a 7.7. Rotten Tomatoes has it at a 96 for critics and an 89 for audience. I wonder how much of that is after the fact critics. I do wonder what the critics at the time would have said. Because I can't imagine that critics like a movie like that. I do feel like that's a little low audience-wise, but, it's a horror movie. There's a lot of people who are just going to be automatically against it. Apparently, Robert Englund was actually, Freddy Krueger himself was on set one day, just hanging out because he gets his friends, and John Carpenter made him throw leaves because they were filming it in, April, May. So, of course, there's not leaves. It's not really fall. So they had to make all these fake, fall leaves. And so John Carpenter was like, hey, go throw these leaves around. But I do think that, you know, so, I mean, he wouldn't go on to be Freddy for a couple years after, but, you know, Freddy was hanging out on set with Mike Myers. This is not the first slasher. A lot of people want to say it is, but it's not. I mean, you could make the argument that Psycho was the first slasher. There's a bunch of independent movies and some ones that, you know, most people have never heard of that are more slashers. You have Texas Chainsaw Massacre, about 4 years before this one, that you could make the argument as maybe more of a slasher. So, like, you don't even have Halloween being the first, like, iconic movie villain, because you got Leatherface a couple years before that. You got, you know, Psycho, you know, way before that. You know, the final girl trope, you know, the Scream Queen, the killing, you know, kind of the rules that the movie Scream would come to make fun of in the 90s, where, you know, the 80s really followed. Like, if you have sex, if you get naked, if you do drugs, if you say I'll be right back, if you're a bitch, you know, the rules that were established in really the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street movies, but all of the knockoffs were established in this, you know, weren't necessarily established in this movie, but it was the first movie to really kind of put all of these elements together. And it used a theme song for a killer. So it didn't, you know, like I said, it didn't really invent any of them, but it was the first one to do it successfully. It was the first one to really be commercially successful. And so because of that, it did definitely create the 80s genre that we all came to know and love. And if you've been following these podcasts, you know, you've heard our love for the 80s horror slasher, or just the 80s horror genre in general. So you do have Halloween itself gives off 11 films, and then 2 remakes. There's actually a timeline, if you look on Wikipedia, where it's 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6, or 1, 2, H2O Halloween Resurrection, or 1, Halloween again in 2018, the one that's coming out this year in 2021, and the one that's coming out next year. So you got Halloween, Halloween, Halloween Kills, Halloween Ends. So you got 3 different timelines, 2 of which use the first 2. The third one only uses the first one. And then you've also got number 3, which is just this bastard child that nobody likes to talk about. They just kind of kick it over to the side. It's, I guess, technically part of the franchise. Originally, John Carpenter had kind of seen Halloween more as a anthology series instead of let's just keep the story going. So it was supposed to be the kickoff of the anthology series, but I guess when he put it out, people hated it so much that they were like, okay, we won't do it. We'll stop that. We apologize, and nobody likes to talk about it.
Except for Jeremy and Ryan.
Except for Jeremy and Ryan. Overall, this movie is very well made, and it's very clearly influenced the genre that it followed. The movie is much less bloody and slower paced than the future that it helped create. And there are tons of plot holes that will probably get filled in by the sequels. Modern audiences will probably be put off by the slow pacing and the lack of gore, but I highly recommend this movie. If for no other reason, you just need to understand your film history and where it comes from. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. You know what? Never mind. I'm going to bump that up to a 4 out of 5. The more I think about it, the more I actually like it. But for history influence rating, full on 5 out of 5. All right, well, then this has been Horror Through the Decades. Join us again next time for number 2, where we will do 1988.